but the main girl character doesn't have a wrinkle and doesn't have a kind of a bad point. She is kind of perfect. For example, if you are attracted by some woman, she's not perfect. If you take her pictures, sometimes her face is like that. It's not perfect, but if always she's perfect, I guess you won't love her.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill. I promised I'd take myself again there someday, and I finally did. But I'm alone there now, waiting to relive a moment that I can never truly re-experience. Playing the Silent Hill series for the first time. The original 4 Silent Hill titles were a series that took the premise of survival horror and stretched that gameplay style into weird, obtuse, and uncomfortable areas that games usually didn't dare to go to. In terms of storytelling, they explored dark and macabre impulses and ideas through the visual and mechanical art that games provide, asked questions on what games were able to do, what information they could relay, and gave interesting answers to those questions. They were a pastiche born from the influences that greatly inspired the team behind them. They were developers tasked with creating a horror franchise that would rival Capcom's Resident Evil, and were given an almost unprecedented amount of creative freedom in pursuit of those goals. Unchecked, young, and eager to break the mold, they were able to create a series of games that were unprecedented at the time, and still hold up compared to what games are doing now. But burdened by the sequel's poor sales, and the more corporate side of Konami suddenly encroaching over the developers, the original team that created the Silent Hill games was disbanded. The Silent Hill franchise was tossed into purgatory, handed over to Western developers who would turn the game into a generic action horror franchise with the broad American appeal that Konami wanted. Silent Hill became a joke, its corpse strung about and paraded by Konami to gather what little enthusiasm remained from its fanbase. Bad film adaptations, pachinko machines, cancelled projects, and constant reminders of when the series once had originality to it. Fizzling out into irrelevancy, Silent Hill seemed to be finally dead. Looking at the history of Silent Hill, the series never getting the graceful ending that it needed, this, at least to me, seemed like a necessary evil. Not the death it deserved, but the end it needed. I didn't grow up playing Silent Hill, unlike how I did with Resident Evil. I first played these games years ago, falling in love with them, but having no nostalgic connection to them or reverence for the brand. Experiencing them for the first time, I was shocked they were even able to make 4 games out of such a limited premise, and that people were demanding the series to continue to satisfy whatever same cravings drove them to buy every new Silent Hill title. A lot of people who would call themselves part of a fandom or an online community, don't really like to hear the idea of their favorite series disappearing from the market. This is not usually out of respect for the art, but more so out of their devotion to the brand and their own nostalgia, not the individual works from the series they're tangentially attached to. I have an immense respect for the original 4 Silent Hill games and what they achieved, and I would contend that, and I don't care if this makes me come off as conceited, I have a higher understanding of what made these games work better than most people who grew up playing them. If you're the type of person who thinks that fostering a percipience for your favorite series is born out of the amount of time you spent playing the games, probably from your childhood, buying the merchandise and every new game, or reading lore entries on a Wikipedia page, then I have no doubt you're the type of person who's buying into and encouraging our culture and medium's refusal to move on from the past, and are unable to create a distance between yourself and the companies trying to extract profit from you. Audiences today, in the age of social media, have a very different relationship to art and media. More gullible, more prone to engage with bad consumer practices, developing entire online communities and fandoms in worship of their favorite IP, playing defense for even the slightest bit of criticism, vessels to birth the ultimate corporate god. That is a nightmare I don't particularly wish to be a part of, and I'm not, but I can't help but notice how many people in the survival horror sphere seem to be trapped in their own personal other other worlds, wanting to endlessly relive every single moment of their past over and over again. To me, that way of viewing and engaging with art is childlike, and, as softly as I can put this, stupid. If the game isn't made by the same group of people who were so fundamental to the series' creation, if we're just exhausting the same concepts over and over again, to me, it's best to move on and understand that any attempts to recreate the specific feelings of a franchise you might have a nostalgic quality for is a waste of time. But to those people who don't want to move on, people who experience intense feelings of FOMO or have found themselves clinging to false sensations of online communities and their respective cult-like fandoms, they have gotten their answer. Remakes. The thing you once loved? Well, it's back now. Better and sexier looking. It's everything you've ever dreamed of. Why don't you take it back home and play with it for a little while? Surely you're not falling for something. Is Silent Hill back? It is. If you want it to be. But to me, it's very clearly a farce, and I would rather have something end than to be unnecessarily drawn out far past its lifespan. But companies and IP cannot let something good die, even if it is time for it to end. The people who own these properties have no concern or even conception of disrespecting or tainting the legacy of a series of works, nor do they have any reverence or respect for the artists who made them to begin with. And new, regardless of if what is put out is good or not, doesn't ring the bells of nostalgia quite the same way that the comfort of what we already know does. Why invest time into new titles that may or may not be of quality or make the sales we expect, and instead of taking the risk with something new, why not remake what was already good? Capcom found this success out in a very cynical way. Konami, envious of the success that Resident Evil has had with its modern reboot and remakes, taking the older titles and streamlining and formulating the older games into homogeny for easy consumption, wanted to copy the success and style of those games. By aping the expected tropes of modern gaming and wrapping that in the paint and watered-down aesthetics of the titles that came before, those with an unhealthy attachment to brand and nostalgia, or just a simple new good old bad mentality, see these remakes as successful pieces of art. Bloober Team's 2024 Silent Hill 2 remake has now become the new martyr for this crowd and market. People who view every title being rebent into the same form over and over as a form of success. A very limited and perverse purview of what art should even be. Although, that's me being generous, of course. I don't think anybody praising and demanding that this practice continue even cares for art or the idea of games as art. I don't believe the idea that the existence of a sequel or a remake doesn't invalidate what came before. Art is an exchange of ideas and information. Like music, it's a conversation that's informed by what came before and what will come after. It's a capsule of the time period it was made under. Not an accurate depiction of what life was like, but the impressions and feelings that lived under every human being. The art is something they wanted to communicate. Information that is very much real, but not accurate, not easily understood. The game industry does not care for this. Information that is not easily understood and passed around to every single human being is not always profitable. In the eyes of big industries like film and games, the value of something is determined by profit. This is not a revelation to anyone, and don't think that I believe I'm making a grand statement by reiterating what everybody already knows, but at a time where profit is dominating this industry more and more, and gamers seem all too eager to eat up anything attached to their favorite brands, it's not a surprise the gaming industry is dominated by the plague of remakes. I've made it no secret in my videos that I kind of despise remakes, at least in the way that they've come to be in the modern gaming sphere. But it's not out of an ideological or irrational grievance towards them. I'm not against a remake simply on principle. One of my favorite video games is the Resident Evil 1 remake on GameCube, a remake that does what most remakes attempt to do now, and yet ends up surprisingly and meaningfully transformative in a way that no other video game remake has. I find that game to be a massive exception in what video game remakes largely don't understand. But that is a story for another day. A remake, to me, shouldn't serve to act as a replacement for the original work. The best movie remakes are fabricated by a director or creative who understands the core appeal of the idea, has a new take on the setting, and creates a wholly distinct work that pays tribute to the original source material, but not necessarily attempting to be faithful. Their aesthetics are meaningfully different, influenced by what's available to them at their current point in time. Video game remakes rarely do that, and when they do, it's almost always an outlier. Game remakes tend to follow the same philosophy Gus Van Sant had when he directed his shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, a very dubious MO giving birth to a pointless film that was rightfully criticized at the time because, as annoying as movie buffs may be, especially in the age of the internet, film enthusiasts actually have respect for their own medium and the creative process. Video game remakes, as I've come to know them, have no interest in further exploring the influences that served in the creation of what they're adapting. Their only interest is in reiteration. The culture around video games is infested with the horrible notion of something being dated, a trigger word for a subsect of consumerist or techno-fetishist gamers that sends them into a crying panic. Their existing toy is old and broken, and now they need a new toy to play with. Games are compiled in a way that no other medium is, save for maybe digital art, and thus can be amended and picked apart and reorganized in any way seen fit. This is an astonishingly adaptive quality that is of great benefit to games and their preservation, but the way this quality has been used in the AAA sphere has primarily been used to further hurt games' preservation. Art preservation is repeatedly under attack in the modern age, and remakes serve to keep people gated into consumerism, to not dare to find a way to experience old art that no longer serves the function of producing profit for the people who have worked tirelessly to keep these old works away from the public. In the case of video game remakes like Silent Hill 2, people are clamoring for this practice to continue, seemingly unaware of the corporate trap they've fallen for. If I said to you that I thought the original Star Wars trilogy was old, outdated, and in need of an update, what with the goofy stilted dialogue and awkward choreography and the smudges all over Darth Vader's helmet, that statement would set off the alarm bells for so many people who respect film as an artistic medium, rightfully so. Most people would agree. For better or for worse, a clash between the weird quirks and the genuine talent and competency on display is what makes Star Wars what it is. A series of remakes would only take away from what's so enjoyable about them. There would be technical or objective improvements, but they would fall in line with everything else and only further hurt the availability of the original cuts. This is what's going on with the Silent Hill franchise, and now Silent Hill 1, 27 years later, is getting the exact same treatment. So many gamers seem all too happy to let amazing works, such as the first 4 Silent Hill games, get bastardized by this cynical process. But for those who care, the artists, the dreamers, the thinkers, the intellectuals, the people in the audience who I represent, we wouldn't change a thing about them. They're perfect. No one else can make Silent Hill like Team Silent did. It's important to restate, these were games made by a team who had almost no corporate oversight. They had their limitations, of course, but were aware of them and worked within them to create these experiences. What these games ended up doing were so absurdly specific, with every attempt after not even coming remotely close, that trying to remake that success, especially in the case of a game like Silent Hill 2, makes very little sense. Bloober Team is not Team Silent. Team Silent made Silent Hill 2, a game that was not profitable and critically well received. They made art for themselves. Bloober Team didn't make Silent Hill 2, and this remake was profitable and critically well received. They made a product to appeal to everyone else. The post-Team Silent games were rightfully lambasted for their obvious attempts to appeal to current Western trends of the time, flanderizing the series' premise, rehashing the same iconography and themes, and turning its light survival horror thriller gameplay into a monotonous series of terrible melee combat and gunplay. Yet in the case of Silent Hill 2 Remake, having the exact same goals as the rest of those older post-SH3 sequels is somehow getting praise. An aspect about Silent Hill that I hope for people to understand, something that many fans forget, and why I have no trust or faith in Bloober Team's remake of Silent Hill 1 or any new developer's attempts to recreate that success, is that the Silent Hill games are, ultimately, Japanese. Despite being set in the US, with voice acting and dialogue recorded in English, influenced by several Western films, they were interpreted through very different, very Japanese sensibilities, with a very Japanese sense of horror and style made by a small Japanese team of developers at a very specific time in gaming history, made on a Japanese console. They were interpreted through the lens of Japan and the American media that was exported. I don't believe it is inherently impossible for another developer from any part of the world to create create a good Silent Hill game, but Bloober Team has shown no interest in recreating that specific style or mood, even with some of the original staff on board as oversight. Not that I would even want them to. I have zero interest in a remake of these games, nor do I want a sequel made by people who aren't Team Silent, as doing so is kind of a pointless endeavor. These are two very different sensibilities, and now the remake, with different, more cynical goals in mind, now has to wrestle with the already established Japanese elements and the limitations of the original hardware that define these games to fit more into this Western, standardized sensibility, and in doing so, stripping the series of so much of what made it appealing. The tangential aspects and iconography are still there. You still get your foggy town, your spooky monsters, your pyramid head, all the things you clap for, the things that you think make a Silent Hill game. But when in the originals, when it was just you standing in a room with nothing really happening, did it stop being Silent Hill? Of course not. It's not about the fog, or the cult, or manifestations of trauma, or the otherworld, or any of the emblems we've used to reify the series. It's the immutable, undiscernible, and vaguely defined details and aberrations that defined Silent Hill. Silent Hill is about the vibe. Those influences and the people and team and time period that gave Silent Hill its very specific vibe are what defined the original Silent Hill games. They are not what define this remake. The only attachment to those prior elements is because of the game's existence as a remake. Whatever was left over is purely tangential, watered down, and without any of its original meaning. If your only experience of this franchise is the modern entries in the remake, you are not understanding the level of ingenuity the original creators were working on. It's unfortunate that so many people who were previously unfamiliar or uninterested in Silent Hill, who instead chose to engage with the remake, dismissed the older titles purely on their age and how they look, when it was that quality and the hardware they were on that gave them that atmosphere, this aura surrounding them. It's why the works of David Lynch, specifically Eraserhead, Inland Empire, and of course Twin Peaks, have this dreamlike otherworldly quality to them. Their age and the periods they were made under ironically bolster them as time progresses, keeping that quality to them transcendent and mystifying. These were a series of games that came about at a very specific point in time, and whether or not you like the game's age, or you even care for old art, it is a defining aspect of those games. One of the more grossly popular reasons people demand a remake is for a graphical update and overhaul of an existing game. Experiencing any game, or demanding a remake, purely for those reasons, I think, is an absolutely dreadful way to experience art, and I have no sympathy or respect for those who refuse to engage with a game or movie simply because it looks old. I understand, in a primitive way, the impulse to see something you admire and imagine what that thing would look like with the benefits and improvements of modern technology, but it's an impulse that rarely ever goes anywhere productive, and it never takes into consideration that the reason something looks the way it does is because of the technology they were working with at the time. If you see Silent Hill 1, or any game in the series, and wish you could see it in higher fidelity with better graphics, I majorly disagree that that would be of any benefit to the game. This is a huge disservice to the original team, who were really pushing what the first two PlayStations were capable of. If it wasn't for the limitations of the PlayStation 1, the hardware that initially defined Silent Hill, the game and the series as a whole would likely be unrecognizable. The PS1's infamously poor draw distance led to the decision to coat the town in fog, a limitation-driven decision that benefited the game's style of horror and defined its look. I would like to ask those who defend the Silent Hill remakes because of the benefits of modern technology, who believe that Silent Hill 1 was somehow held back, do you think Silent Hill would have been better if the PlayStation 1 didn't have this limitation? Would the absence of the need for the fog have brought about an even greater franchise that we right now cannot even begin to comprehend? I don't feel that way. The Silent Hill games were heavily informed by the technology and built their styles around them. There wasn't an incentive or possibility to be realistic, so they could create a visual space that games, as an artistic medium, can uniquely provide. This perfect blend of the technology and the art defined Silent Hill's look when it entered the PlayStation 2. Sparse architecture, weird exaggerated detail, dreamy, floaty, or unnatural animation work. It's ghostly, eerie, transcendent. It's a look that's so specific to Silent Hill. What benefit would there be to remaking games from this era that more often than not look like this? Why take away from that? How could you look at the beauty on display with these games and not see that? How could you demand for this to be updated, or that this is outdated, that this should be barred from public viewing? What else would you add to these gorgeous works without taking their beauty away? People are so unaware that the things that they supposedly like, the art and iconography that's now being endlessly rehashed, was defined and brought about by the limitations that were supposedly holding these things back. They emerged from those older styles, and I think this is most apparent in the game's camera style, a wonderful showcase of the team's ability to take their influences and translate them into gameplay. The works of David Lynch in the film Jacob's Ladder served as the biggest initial influences for the Silent Hill series, and the creators wanted to create a cinematic camera style and direction that would properly pay tribute to those films, creating a very natural evolution of the framing of Resident Evil's static, pre-rendered backgrounds with an added layer of flexibility and movement thanks to the better hardware. I love fixed camera angles in games, and it's an immense shame that people who go back to play older titles treat them with such undeserved disdain. It's viewed as a crime in modern gaming to not give the player complete control of all systems and comfort them every step of the way. Even if you think the over-the-shoulder style is just a flat-out better camera system for games, I don't think it's better for what Silent Hill was going for. A limitation of the time, sure, but a style of visual storytelling so thoroughly and passionately explored, so instrumental in the foundation of these games' mood and set pieces, and a marriage between its movie influences and the gameplay experience, unifying the game under a very cohesive presentation and way of seeing the world. This gave the developers a massive amount of control for the type of experience they wanted to cater. The use of certain angles or shots could allow the game to hone in on certain moments or aspects during the gameplay and frame it just as effectively as a movie can, entering an area and suddenly the camera fixes itself or pans in a certain direction. It can be used to forecast a sense of unease in the player or direct them to an important area or an item during gameplay. A system so thoughtfully placed and considered for the player's experience, I have to assume that anybody who writes the old camera system off was absolutely not paying attention or didn't play the games. The entire intro to Silent Hill 2 is purely for setting the mood, with the camera framing James's descent into the town, soaking it in and building that sense of dread. So much of your time in these games is spent simply just walking around through this digital space in constant admiration of the environments and everything on display, helped in large part by the music and sound design of Akira Yamaoka. Pulling from his own many eclectic influences and his heavy use of sampling, he created a score not at all seen in much horror or even video games at the time, and never trying to resemble one specific or expected style. He just wanted to make the type of music that he likes. And if you've watched my videos before, you know I like his music too. The Silent Hill games are tapping into something that is, as overused as this term will be throughout the video, Lynchian. And the games, like Lynch's work, take typical mundane settings and expose a seedy underbelly that's lurking underneath, taking the benign or quaint human constructs and shaping them to resemble something tainted, fitting for the stories they told. And in that town, you meet some odd characters. And if there's one thing you're probably going to take away from the original Silent Hill games, it's going to be the voice acting. And calling it odd would be an understatement. Jeremy Blaustein was the voice director and translator for Silent Hills 2, 3, and 4, and had complete control over the direction. If you're familiar with the games he's worked on, this direction style isn't actually that unique to Silent Hill. These games were originally recorded in English, mo-capped and played out on set, with some of the most well-animated pre-rendered cutscenes of that era. All of the facial animations, Takeyoshi Sato animated by hand, by the way, because he didn't think mo-capping the faces would make them expressive enough, which is an insane amount of effort to put into something like this. Most of everyone who performed in the games were amateur acting students with little prior acting experience. Guy Seehee, the actor for James, didn't originally audition for the role. He showed up to the studio for his daughter's audition for Laura, and although she didn't get the part, he later became interested and landed the role of James. The entire process was surprisingly collaborative compared to AAA development now, but it's hard to tell if the voice work was what the developers truly wanted, even with Blaustein's explicit influence from David Lynch. But in an interview with Polygon, Blaustein talked about his process for translating Symphony of the Night, the literary influences he infuses into his work, and said, "I tried to write the script in a semi-archaic way, giving characters' speeches a bygone flavor impossible to pin down to a single time or place. And that applies almost exactly to how characters speak in Silent Hills 2 through 4. It is amateur. It isn't really good on an objective level, but it is astonishingly directed and understood in a way that even AAA games now are not. There is a rawness and virginity to these performances that resonate in an odd way, so dreamlike and enduring. Every pronunciation, delivery, emphasis, and line I remember by heart. There's an almost musical quality to the way they talk. It's hard to achieve this amount of verbal stylization and have it be charming and not annoying like it often can. The games can be quite funny, but not in an ironic sense. These are incredibly sincere stories about flawed, weird, but ultimately down-to-earth and average people attempting to grapple and deal with the haphazard emotions and immense grief taken to heightened extremes. These are stories that are voyeuristic and not meant to be fully immersive. The characters aren't self-inserts. They are the ones who guide the experience. It's about them, not you. It's hard to impress on those who haven't played the original games how specific they are. They were lightning in a bottle, and that energy could never be recaptured after Team Silent's disbandment. They are experiences that stand the test of time, that anybody can enjoy, but the games are not available on modern storefronts. Silent Hill 2 and 3 have essentially become abandonware. So when the remake of Silent Hill 2 was announced, made by a developer with a not good track record for horror games,
just know that tomorrow morning before school, you're gonna be mad because you didn't take a bath.
I was worried. Not because I thought the game was going to be a hilarious mess, no way Konami would allow that, but because I knew that it would solidify Konami's disinterest in the original games, that their availability would be harmed, and people would not be experiencing the real Silent Hill. But now, the remake is here. It exists. And it's been a critical and commercial success. Everyone's expectation was that the game would be hilariously bad after the reveal trailer, and it turned out to not be. And while I obviously have no idea what that initial version of SH2 Remake would have been like, I'm not under the impression much of the game was actually changed in the final product, other than the things that were initially mocked being slightly altered after public ridicule. But the remake has been out for over a year now, and a large category of people seem to like it. Some people claim it's better than the original. So, Kurt, did you hate the Silent Hill 2 remake? No. I mean, I would say I hate it as a remake. I hate its existence. I hate what it says about the industry, and I hate what it'll do to Silent Hill 2's legacy. But did I hate the game I was playing? Well, no. And it would be dishonest of me if I said I did. But that doesn't mean that I liked it. This remake is incredibly uncanny, and I don't use that word in the same way I would use it to describe the original game. Most of Silent Hill 2 Remake is fine. Just fine. When I shoot an enemy, it feels okay. When characters speak, they sound normal. Things overall look nice, and sometimes the game spooked me. It's all fine. Functional. Maybe, sometimes, even pretty good. But how much of that experience is owed to the new devs and not the original crew who laid the foundation for everything this remake is doing? This is what makes it tricky to assess the game on its own terms. The aspects that are good or memorable are things that were in the original that were already done better. So when I hear people praise Silent Hill 2 Remake, whether they be new fans or old, I don't believe those people even realize that they're all actually praising the original game, which created almost everything this remake does. How much of the new content is that standout or worthy of praise, and how important is it to somebody's fundamental understanding of Silent Hill 2? The game is, categorically speaking, functionally transformative. The game is now a third-person, over-the-shoulder style action horror shooter. It doesn't play like the original, but the experience here and the product we get serve to function as a reprint, so to speak, i.e., a replacement. The games industry has become one big table of leftovers, and most developers have relegated themselves to functioning as a microwave. So, if you didn't play the original Silent Hill 2, a game we have actively worked to not make available, then you can just play the remake made by an entirely different team. It's basically the same thing. It's not. The remake is an adequate, more accessible experience, but it is a less interesting experience. It's a less thought-provoking experience. But you know, if you've never played the original, or just weren't paying attention to the details that made it what it was, or you're uncultured, then sure, the remake comes off normal enough. But descriptors like normal and fine are not how the original Silent Hill 2 and the rest of the Team Silent games made me feel. There are moments where the remake does something kind of interesting and wants you to believe it'll go somewhere unexpected, mainly for people who have played the original. But in execution, it really doesn't. It's a very stretched out and padded retread. The game and the story it told already exist. It was done as thoroughly as you possibly could. What more is there to add or say? What is even the benefit of a retelling? Well, there isn't one, and the game knows that, so nothing substantial was added or changed. This isn't a great re-examination of Silent Hill 2's story, so if you're closed-minded and can't accept playing a game that's old, or you're trapped by your childhood and nostalgia and will clap for anything you recognize, then you're exactly the type of person this remake is for. Unless you're me, and you played this remake out of spite, which in that case, I guess I also am some sort of target demographic for these type of games, so oops. I mean, I say that in jest. I just really needed to see what exactly people were praising here, and I came out really disappointed and baffled by people's praises of the bare minimum. So, before I pull the trigger, I should know who I'm shooting. Every time I had to put the game down, I didn't have much desire to return. And the more I forced myself to continue playing the remake for this video, and the more the game went on, the more every aspect of it overstayed its welcome. When a franchise constantly changes hands or approaches, the varying clashing ideas create a sense of discomfort within the audiences. So the people in charge of the series will then course correct and make sure everything appears normal and expected, scrubbing off the things that people associate with the products not made by the original team or artists. Look, here's more of the same. It looks like everything you know because we just remade the thing you already knew. It's Silent Hill 2, but new and improved with better graphics because, as we all know, the more graphics a game has, the better it looks. You can't formulate art down to a science, and when big franchises attempt to do that, they just reiterate the things we already know. It's a rehash of iconography. Initially, I'll be honest, when it wasn't actively annoying me with its retelling of Silent Hill 2, it did have my full attention as a game. Seeing the town of Silent Hill realized to this extent after all of these years, it has its charms and I wasn't completely immune to them. But it's also not an enlightening or even fresh experience despite the technology on display, due to its nature as a remake. Graphics are good, the detail is immense, but that's mostly due to the benefits of modern technology. There are areas where I was impressed by what was on display, and I would be incredibly disingenuous if I said this remake looked bad, but that's mainly because they're borrowing the art from a previous title. And when compared to the original games, I don't believe it comes anywhere close to the artistry on display. Silent Hills 2 and 3 have a beautiful form and structure, but are compiled out of nasty details, embellished in a nightmarish grime and rust, a level of visual noise that works much better with the lower fidelity of those consoles and the framing of the camera work. When those games switched to their other worlds and most nightmarish locations, they looked pure evil in a way no other video game horror franchise has even come close to. A hard look to recreate in something like Unreal, where almost everything is left up to the mercy of the engine, and the image is doused and glazed with every possible visual effect you can have. I've seen remakes sacrifice a lot of visual clarity or cohesion in the look just for the sake of pushing tech, and stripping the original games of their intended mood, giving the game a graphical style homogeneous and like everything else, everything having this uncanny level of polish and shine to it, which, if not feeling like an unnecessary graphical showcase, is somewhat unfitting for how the original games constructed their environments. This remake is only inspired by the original Silent Hill 2, and is derivative. There's only so many times I can see the same foggy town and rusty otherworld and have that feel novel or meaningful. But again, if you like seeing the same ideas reiterated endlessly, then this remake is for you. When the entire game isn't pulling from the already existing imagery, it just looks generic. This trickles down to the look of the characters, who have the typical redesign for the sake of redesign thing going on, like in most pointless remakes. Maria's redesign is the worst. Not only is her new look duller, but she has this massive, awkward bobblehead and facial proportions that make her design look so off. The original games went for accurate proportions and anatomy, but still had a somewhat anime-ish look to the characters' hair and faces, but nothing that evokes an overly wacky or cartoony feeling. A look to the models they really perfected in 3 and 4. 4, a very Rembrandt-style approach to their looks, which gave them a real believable impression that helped them age on the hardware. This is also why remaking Silent Hill 3 in particular is a bad idea, because not only is it a contender for the best looking game of all time, but the gaming industry has yet to make a character model that looks better than Heather. Seriously, they can't. They just can't do it. They just plumb forgot. The remake's characters are at a higher fidelity with more detail, especially compared to their in-game look in the original Silent Hill 2, but the models themselves vary wildly in their quality that almost give them an uncanny DreamWorks-like affectation that's really unappealing to look at, especially in comparison to, again, Silent Hill 3 and 4's amazing facial animations and character models. 2003, by the way, is when Silent Hill 3 came out. I think it says a lot when these 25-year-old FMVs have more expressive animation work and movements compared to the remake's cutscenes. On the topic of cutscenes, it's maddening to me that people who praise the new camera style as better than the outdated originals somehow don't have that same vitriol for the cutscenes, because I was shocked at how bad the cinematography looked in the remake compared to the original. In Silent Hills 2 and 3, the games were creating cinematography that looked unusual. Whatever they did, they were going for a style of cinematography that you could only really do with the animated, virtual nature of video games. The remake is shot like a very standard movie. Really bland work here. Throughout the entire game, there is a concerted effort to scrub away the very Lynchian, amateurish, but very dreamlike and hazy feel of the original game's voice acting, probably to prevent any scenes from potentially coming off as somewhat goofy, given the very unfiltered nature of the original game's dialogue. Their attempts to make the characters more realistic and grounded end up making the characters feel muted. By and large, the remake recites most of the original dialogue, just changing certain words or switching sentences here and there. And this is one of my main issues when it comes to these fake adaptations. The original game's lines weren't made for this direction, and the remake has almost no style to the dialogue other than being realistic, leaving some of the remake's reinterpretations of classic scenes awkwardly paced and stilted.
What's that letter?
None of your business. You didn't love Mary anyway.
Wait! How do you know Mary's name?
What you got there?
None of your business. You didn't love Mary anyway.
What? Hey, wait! How do you know her name?
This isn't the first time this direction has been used before on these characters. The 2012 Silent Hill HD collection redubbed all of the dialogue from Silent Hill 2 and 3 with professional voice actors, with James being played by none other than Troy Baker. And you can immediately tell how wrong it sounds compared to the original, even if you've never played these games.
This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
Okay,
It's...
I got it. I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Is it dangerous?
maybe. And it's not just the fog either. It's...
Okay, I got it. I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
I should state that this game's vocal direction is nowhere near as bad as the HD collection, but it does share the same flawed ethos in how to make these characters more believable. Believability is not realism. I remember the first time I played Silent Hill 2 and how much it caught me off guard. It created an initial unease that I didn't know how to feel about, but by the end of the game, every performance made sense. People used to look at the dialogue of the original games and go, that's fantastic. That's what makes Silent Hill, Silent Hill. And then the remake comes out, absent of that unique vibe, and has performances that are above average, and people, whether new fans or old fans, retroactively say that it sounds terrible. But again, like with everything else in the game, the performances here are mostly fine. Angela, in my opinion, was surprisingly the best performance in the remake, and was overall pretty decent for what they were going for. But what they did end up going with was not the original intent of her character and her design. The original Angela was 19, but appeared and sounded much older than she was. The trauma she endured aging her. Now she's straightforwardly played as a realistic teenage girl, with a more angsty and overtly depressed performance and mannerisms. Whereas the original Angela looked and sounded way more distraught and fearful of everything around her. Her brow brash tone of voice and exchanges with James felt like an unrecognized cry for help. She is, unfortunately, unpleasant in a way that many abuse victims and people dealing with serious trauma unfortunately are. Played by a 40-year-old actress, the juxtaposition pronounced how weird it felt whenever she stated she was looking for her mama. If the change to have her appear, sound, and act like her actual age was to make her more sympathetic, or just them not getting the point, either way, it's a prime example of this game's lack of faith in the original characters. Eddie is noticeably out of line with this new direction and style, now feeling like a tangential leftover who's even less nuanced in his performance and look. Eddie was a very typical suburbanite kid who acted out in a way that those who are bullied and ostracized tragically do. The remake has him behave like a supervillain maniac because normal outcasted people who engage haphazardly in the taking of others' lives is somehow a foreign concept to Bloober Team. This off-recharacterization doesn't stop at the side characters, but makes its way to the main character of James, to an even larger degree, stripping him of everything that made him unique. The first Silent Hills protagonist was Harry Mason, a loving father and a handsome, confident, yet still very humble and grounded everyman who charged head-on to the horrors with a noble determination. Most survival horror protagonists of that time were of an even more heightened quality. James Sunderland was not like any of that. Awkward and bumbling, geekily earnest or eager in places he probably shouldn't be, and yet almost completely unfazed with the horrors right in front of him. He talks like a borderline psychopath at points. He's not handsome, he's not noble or charming or alluring, he's almost barely there, and you never get a good read on the guy. A complete nobody who doesn't have much to lose. In contrast to those he meets, he seems more in tune, only for those lines to become blurred and the more nasty qualities of his character get revealed as his limits are pushed. Your first look at James is him peering at himself in the mirror, letting out a disgusting moan in an unflattering angle. The people he meets don't understand him or really trust him. He's paired with a brash seductress whose only seeming purpose is to keep him confused and staying in the town. He has one goal, and everything he does is in pursuit of that one goal, even if it comes at the expense of others. And as you play and replay the game for its multiple endings, more is revealed at just how troubled of a guy James really is. Those around him, whether they be human or monster, serve as reflections and reminders of the kind of guy he might really be inside or could become. And the game never concludes on what kind of person James exactly is and how you should feel about him. James Sunderland in the remake is almost James in name only. James in the remake is handsome and charming and seemingly well-adjusted, a confident and determined widow and his noble quest to find his wife. Even his outfit is more masculine and uniform compared to James's original design. He is like everybody else, a man portrayed as a flawed caretaker of a sick loved one, and less like a troubled man at his end's wits in the nastiest period of his life, like the original James, who was sexually frustrated and exhausted when dealing with his wife's terminal illness, who takes the easy way out to deal with both of their turmoils, a nuance and a perspective in reading that is lost in this new direction. He's meant to act as a player insert, when the original James was not, and work to create a distance between James and the player. I'm so confused as to how they're going to tackle Harry Mason in the remake, because in their attempt to make James a charming, handsome everyman, they just remade Harry Mason. If there's one word I'd have to use to describe James Sunderland in the remake, it would be boring. Portraying this character as some sort of romantic, weepy, tortured soul is just kind of absurd. It shows a lack of faith in that original character's direction. In their attempts to ground somebody who really didn't need grounding, he ends up becoming bland. Bloober Team conflating believability with likability. He's not exactly like that much more realistic. His original iteration's odd and quirky nature, though performed in a stylized manner, felt more like a deeper exploration into a human being's impulses and raw emotions. Everything to do with James, and the rest of the characters in this remake, is part of an effort to more concretely absolve James of his crime. So his nastier and potentially very off-putting characteristics have been hand-waved or ignored by the plot. So because James is made tamer, his on-screen relationship with Maria suffers the hardest, who went from being the best performance in the original to the weakest performance in the remake. Completely dull in her direction, her mystique and persona soften, a character whose ever-changing line deliveries and direction make her feel like the developers couldn't decide on a single approach approach to this character other than trying to downplay her sex appeal and make her more believable as a normal person in an attempt to mask any of her overtly suspicious qualities, which seemed fine at first, as the game has more moments between Maria and James, with Maria acting innocuous enough for the most part. But when she gets killed by Pyramid Head and reappears in the labyrinth to taunt James, that's all you're getting from her. I was left under the impression that this new direction and these moments between the two were going to lead up to something meaningful, but they don't. They don't add any new scenes between the two. So all of this buildup is wasted time in service of repeating the exact same beats as before. What is the point in adding any of this if it's then going to stick so close to the original game's script? I don't think that serves her character well and how she fits into this narrative. The original Maria was a character meant to incite as many questions as possible right from the start, the game refusing to elaborate or concretely state on who or what Maria is. Time isn't wasted, and it's up to the player to parse the meaning of her existence and what she represents about James's psyche. Suddenly, James is faced with a dolled up version of his dead wife who claims to be someone else entirely, who keeps tugging at him to get his attention, never letting him get an exact read on her. It's never certain if her goals are her own or that of the town itself trying to coerce James. She's nuanced and a believable performance, but the game isn't asking you to think of her as a real human being. It's not trying to exactly hide the fact that there's something up with her, nor is it pointing to the obvious. In their attempts to make Remake Maria appear more like a real person, they've made her less of a character. Same with James. And that really just destroys the most integral scenes between these two. Every readapted scene in the remake between them is so awkwardly paced and stilted. When James first encounters Maria, he's amazed at what he sees, his captivation building and building, only for Maria to clap back and playfully mock his rampant fascination.
I can't believe it. You could be her twin. Your face, your voice, just your hair and clothes are different.
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
In the remake, it plays out like this.
I can't believe it. Your face, your voice, you could be...
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
It is incredible that 23 years prior, this original game still has better performances than the remake.
James!
Mary? Oh, Maria. It's you. I thought you were... Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? You don't sound very happy to see me. I was almost killed back there. Why didn't you try to save me? All you care about is that dead wife of yours. I've never been so scared in my whole life.
Anyway, I'm glad you're alive.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway? I was almost killed back there. I have never been so scared in my whole life. All you care about is that dead wife of yours.
This is what every exchange between James and Maria in the remake is like. There is no chemistry or cutting friction between the two. Her aggressive yet playful sexual displays counter James's awkwardness and almost earnest innocence and naivety. Her brash nature and her claims of not being Mary serve to make James and the player unsure of how to feel about her until the end. This is why Maria gets mad at James for saying, "Anyway, I'm glad you're alive," because it's such an awkwardly clueless and blunt form of reassurance to say to someone who could have almost died. That clash between James's awkwardness, Maria's aggressive flirtation, and James's indecisiveness and confusion towards her is the central heart of Silent Hill 2. And you're not getting that dynamic here. You're getting half-baked, meet-cute, rom-commy tier dialogue. Everyone putting on that same huffy-puffy, melodramatic affectation you see in every AAA game now.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, it's just... this place just gives me the creeps. I'm not sure why.
You ever been inside?
I'm not sure. It does feel familiar somehow. Like a bad memory.
There is more of it, there are more words being spoken, but none of it contributes to the narrative or fundamentally shifts what this story is, and I don't think it's memorable or interesting. The few original scenes in the game, such as the scene between James and Maria in Heaven's Night, were alright, because these new interpretations actually get to properly be themselves instead of awkwardly retreading over someone else's work. But I don't think it makes up for the vast majority of the interactions being so dull and flaccid, even removing things like James's reference to suicide in his final interaction with Angela, and softening or removing certain scenes with Pyramid Head. This grounding of these characters, it doesn't make them more nuanced, it makes them more linear. It creates a more functional purpose for their existence, instead of wavering in the broad strokes where the players are meant to read between the lines a little. There are reasons behind all of this, reasons I do not agree with, but decisions that aren't coming from absolutely nowhere. They're all in service of Bloober Team's efforts to right the wrongs of the original, so to speak, and explains why the remake, tonally, can feel neutered when compared to the original. Censorship, I don't think is the right word for what's going on here, but core tenets of Silent Hill 2's tone and style have pieces of them missing in service of what Bloober Team thinks is a more coherent retelling. And in case you're wondering where all of this is leading to, this is the part of the video where I tell you the thing that you thought was so deep isn't actually as deep as you probably thought it was. The original Silent Hill 2's imagery played heavily on themes of sex and death, very apparent in the game's enemy designs and characters. Every monster James faces is overtly feminine and erotic, and as James, you may find yourself spending many points throughout the game, remorselessly killing these monsters. Throughout James's journey, he is tantalized with this imagery. He visits a nightclub, a hospital with sexy nurses, and meets a mirror of his dead wife that continually teases him and attempts to seduce him. It seems as if the town wants something from James. And then there's the one singular male-presenting monster, Pyramid Head, who wanders around the town, abusing these creatures and doing other things to them, and is repeatedly showcased killing the woman who looks just like his dead wife. These are pretty vile and shocking things to witness, meant to unleash a very visceral response on behalf of the player. It's intense and incredibly resonating imagery that's speaking louder than the people behind it. And if you're hoping to get a concrete explanation as to why any of this is happening by the end, and why it appears the way that it does, you're not exactly getting that. The game isn't attempting to make a definitive statement about what these scenes are supposed to represent or how they relate to James specifically, so their vagueness can be easily misinterpreted, often misread by people as depictions of rape. Looking at interviews from the developers since Silent Hill 2's release, it's likely that the sexual undertones that people read from the original Silent Hill 2 were way overstated by the game itself. Masahiro Ito has been very vocal about how he feels about this, and in his frustration has essentially given his answer as to what certain scenes or things even mean. It's difficult to tell how truthful this all is when diving into the creation of Silent Hill 2. Not that I believe he's lying, but much of what Ito has said about certain facets of Silent Hill, especially 2, have contradicted the statements other developers have said regarding their intentions. A good deal of Silent Hill's imagery is obtuse and hard to parse. Things are implied and never stated by word, and as such, are open for a multitude of different interpretations. Is Pyramid Head a mirror of James? Both spend their time in the game killing these monsters. Are the salacious designs of the enemies meant to represent James's frustrated libido during Mary's 3-year-long illness? Did these things initially mean something else in development and were changed later on? I don't know, I could be wrong, and that's fine, because I don't think something lacking a concrete explanation for its existence means it isn't purposeful and important to the tone of the finished work. This is already a game that devotes major scenes and set pieces to a character facing manifestations of the sexual abuse that she has faced. These scenes between Pyramid Head and the monsters he abuses fit the story of Angela as much as they do James, maybe even more. So it's not as if these moments are exactly unfitting or inappropriate for a game like this, which is more often than not very abstract and playing with a variety of different subject matters and unfiltered, very raw emotions all at once. I don't like when an artist, dealing with media like this, feels the need to explain every bit of symbolism to prevent possible widespread viewer misinterpretations, which again, we have no idea if what he's saying is really the truth. However, what we do know is that we don't know. It's easy for people to want to put text behind visual art and physical performances, especially in a series like this where much of it is so riddled. like the red save squares. I don't think they originally had a concrete meaning to them. I think they were just a unique looking save icon that stuck out to the player easily and fit the game's visual style and mood. It's an image that the player gets used to, learns to recognize, and eventually finds some strange source of comfort in. So when you get to the final boss and see this image presented to you, it's striking in a way that no piece of dialogue can convey. No authorial text about what exactly this means could ever create the same feeling as what you are seeing and how you feel in the moment. If all of these aspects, the abstractions and implications, start to overtake the text or original intent, which happens throughout most of Silent Hill 2 and 3, I think trying to denominate meaning towards every visual and performance isn't conducive to understanding and appreciating a game like Silent Hill 2. I don't even think the developers were thinking about a character like Maria in the same way that we as players try to rationalize her. So playing down sexual themes because of possible, maybe harmful misinterpretations or accusations of sexism, I understand that. But if your opening to your first Pyramid Head boss fight was him moaning while humping and eating a monster, if you created art that looked like this, I think the original intentions are second to the viscerality of the art you're wanting to display. Reminder, James kills his sick wife by smothering her face with a pillow. He meets two other people, guilty of murder, who have faced varying degrees of abuse and trauma, who act out irrationally because of it. I don't think having Pyramid Head, a demon monster thing, born from a town's evil cult gods, who is obviously an enemy to James, engage in what could be potentially seen as rape or assault towards these female monsters is very out of place for a horror game dealing with imagery relating to sex, death, and trauma, even if it was probably a mistake. With all of that in mind, Bloober Team and the original developers who consulted on the remake at the very least had an understanding of the mistakes that were originally made, and so removed or sanded down these elements so that the players would foster a better and clearer understanding of what may or may not have been the original intent behind Silent Hill 2. But when you do that, when you recontextualize to that extent, you open up an entire can of worms that you then need to clean up. If the original game's text was in need of a deconstruction or a revamp because the supposed meaning was lost behind the more resonating imagery and horror, what are you going to supplement what you then took away or literalized? And when you take that away, remove interpretations and imagery, retroactively apply ideas to previous work, the final product ends up making less sense than what it was originally meant to be. If James really is a good guy underneath, why is he killing these monsters en masse? If James seems to be much more lucid and in control, why is the game still haunting him with imagery relating to suicide to try and push him into taking his own life? If Pyramid Head is more of a guiding force to James rather than a representation of his impulses, why is he still an enemy in the game? Why do we still have that scene of him assaulting the mannequins while James hides in the closet? Why does he leave the room and come back to kill James? Why do we still have these feminine monster designs? Why is Angela even here? Why have Angela's themes of rape and abuse be alongside James's own meanings of disassociation and running away from his mistakes? Why does the game work to definitively absolve James of Mary's murder? If Mary is meant to be more of a nuanced, independent being with her own volition separate from the town, if her sexuality is downplayed to make her more believable, if we're building up to something with all of these new scenes and then absolutely nothing new with her after her death, what is she even doing here? What does she want from James? Why even keep Maria provocative at all? Why not make her friendly and kinder and cuter, more appealing in an emotional way so that James has an actual reason to be attached to her other than possible sex? Why would this iteration of James be allured and seduced by her at all? James in the original is judged fairly neutrally and vaguely. None of the other endings from the original, other than the leave ending, make much sense with this depiction of James. Why is any of this happening if it's now made to be so literal? How much of Silent Hill 3 is actually about womanhood if you think about it? I mean, it sounds like it, right? Heather is a 17-year-old girl chosen by the cult to carry a god who she will then be forced to give birth to while experiencing these pains that contort the world around her while encountering imagery that seems to allude to sex and body, with the game ending with her expelling the fetus of God by taking a pill. Sounds pretty concrete if I explain it to you that way. But if you look at the actual plot, it really has nothing to do with abortion or teenage pregnancy. It's a fairly straightforward horror story about family, fatherhood, and the cult that's terrorizing them. And in that simple framework, you encounter some of the series' most disturbed and abstract imagery. Is this monster supposed to represent body dysmorphia? Is this supposed to be a sperm? Is this supposed to be a penis? Is this coat hanger and pills supposed to represent abortion? Is this even actually legitimately bred? I'm not sure, and like Silent Hill 2, the game will not give you an answer for that. It's fine to pull from or gesture towards things that don't really have much to do with the literal intent behind your work. That's the point of expression, and I think platforms like YouTube encourage people to take a very literalist approach to these things, with people's obsession with lore and categorizing every single little detail. If they wanted to tell a story about that subject matter, then they could have just told a story concerning those things. But all of that implication, that really doesn't have much to do with the moment-to-moment character beats and narrative of Silent Hill 3, sticks with people. It meant something to people. It does genuinely say a lot about womanhood, abuse, consent, and growing up, even if that wasn't the point of Silent Hill 3. It's a little frustrating that the original Silent Hill games are sold to people as super deep and arcane with so many esoteric little details, because while there is truth to that, and I love what these games display, it undersells just how well these games simply told their stories and built those experiences. It's cool to chew on things like the cult and how its gods work and how the powers of the town work, but those are secondary to how much you can tell the devs just enjoy telling stories and making characters and playing with horror tropes, with the media and art that inspired them. I don't want a big book of lore that says, look at how deep Silent Hill is, we fit all of this fictional backstory into these games that really doesn't matter at the end of it, and the developers know this too. They reference it and leave little details to mess with you. Parts of what made Silent Hill 2 and the rest of the trilogy what they were likely mistakes and unintentional, and just artists wanting to create provocative imagery that would stay with the player. These were simple stories, but left ample room for expression. It's a very Lynchian form of storytelling. You're not supposed to make a literal sense of it, you're supposed to see what it means to you. The original Silent Hill 2 did have meaning. It had purpose for every scene, but it didn't have logic. You can't literalize a story that isn't exactly interested in telling it in a place that exists in our understood reality. If the intent is to make sense of all of this and streamline it for easy understanding, you would have to make Silent Hill 2 and the rest of the Team Silent titles into very different games. And I think Bloober Team recognized this problem when making Silent Hill 2 Remake. But because it's a standard AAA cash grab remake where the intent is to still repeat every major beat and have this version act as the replacement, meaningful changes and reinterpretations by the new creators cannot be made. So removing these scenes, removing this imagery and subtext, removing that original characterization, downplaying integral aspects of the original's identity without adding anything new of substance, makes the remake's experience feel hollow. There isn't much for the player to think about and interpret when compared to the original. It's only interested in restating the things everybody already knows. This seems like a lot to say for what amounts to them just removing a couple of scenes and lines of dialogue, but it trickles down throughout the entire game. Bloober Team have even gone back and censored their own work in post-launch updates. The remake isn't much of a transformative work, at least in the literal sense of it now being a third-person shooter. It feels less artful. It feels less like it's reaching for other ideas beyond meaning and reason. The standardization, the sanitization, the relitigation of ideas that didn't benefit from reclarification run throughout every bit of the remake. And if you're looking for a pure version of that Silent Hill vibe, look somewhere else. That's not what the remake is. It is looking to standardize Silent Hill 2 down to its core. And as such, everything that made that game unique as a piece of video game storytelling is made to play and look and feel like everything else. Silent Hill 2 is now an action horror, over-the-shoulder, third-person shooter, with frantic melee combat and weak points and multi-phase boss fights and combat arenas. This is comforting. It's an expected, formulated style that can be easily understood, easily marketed, and made for easy consumption. Trapped in this tired formula, the expressive elements of the original game are now gone. A directionless and uninspired choice with only one purpose. Take Silent Hill 2 and make it a third-person shooter with a ton of combat like everything else on the market. People have brought up the intro to Silent Hill 1 a lot when discussing their anticipation of that game's remake, whether they'll keep or change the game's iconic intro because of the over-the-shoulder perspective. And in that discussion about it, people are already, whether they admit it or not, developing an understanding of what's wrong with the new camera style. If the Silent Hill 1 remake doesn't keep the intro cinematography, then it shows how truly bland this new perspective is. But if they do keep it, then it's an admission from Bloober Team of how restrictive the over-the-shoulder perspective is. It would be so laughable of the remake to just keep the original cinematography for this one scene and then go back to being a third-person shooter. It would make the game feel so incohesive. The intro to Silent Hill 1 is brilliant. It's the perfect showcase of that game's style, technical prowess, and art design. None of that could ever be recaptured in this style. When the game isn't just doing Silent Hill 2 again, the game can become one of the most monotonous third-person shooters I have ever played. Every area is now laid out the same, bloated past its accepted length, where you complete pointless navigational busywork with a central puzzle that requires multiple different parts, where you complete more pointless backtracking while you navigate these spaces and their incredibly recursive design, some of the worst level design for a survival horror game in a long time, and within that busywork you periodically engage with the same 3 enemy types in repetitive, predictable, clunky, exhausting melee and shooter combat, where every enemy requires you to do the same exact approach to deal with them over and over and over and over, and because the game's level design is still so claustrophobic, the camera being fixed behind James actually leads to more issues than the original when the game tasks you with fighting more than one enemy at once, where some of them just appear and attack you out of nowhere, and you have to fight against the camera just as much as you fight against the enemies because the game's camera and levels are barely designed around fighting more than one enemy in these incredibly claustrophobic rooms, and the narrative that was so integral to every aspect of the original game's design comes to a grinding halt in these bloated puzzle boxes and combat encounters and transitional areas that add nothing to the experience. What is the appeal of this? Do third-person shooters just appeal to a desire to have everything be as uninteresting as possible? Is this the only vehicle in which people can properly experience a game? The original game's combat was not an issue. It wasn't good combat, but it wasn't something you were meant to wholly engage with. It is janky, lacking depth, and awkward and unreliable to engage with. And although that was largely unintentional, the final game was constructed around that limitation. Like most survival horror games of that era, it is perfectly acceptable and encouraged to run past the enemies wherever possible. It didn't force combat encounters outside of the few requisite boss fights because the game wasn't interested in that. In the remake, you are more than often strong-armed into taking part in equally janky, unsatisfying third-person shooter combat. It is fatiguing, it is a visual eyesore, and it doesn't align at all with the vibe of the original Silent Hill games. James is a guy. A random, average nobody. The combat reflecting his status and keeping the tone grounded to the game's setting and story, regardless of if you find it fun or not. It is the exact type of experience suited to this protagonist, the tone of the game, and the story being told. When you kill an enemy in Silent Hill, it just dies. There's no reward, no sense of catharsis or feelings of triumph. The game is like, okay, you killed an enemy. So what? There's going to be plenty of more. That pointlessness is potent. Even if the poor combat system was solely due to the devs not having the time or resources to create a deeper combat system, it would not be of benefit to the game. And now that we have a game that so foolishly does just that, it's so blatant how this fetishization of typical, expected video game combat has only hurt the story they're trying to tell. Defenders of the remake and detractors of the original are eager to point out the goofy boss fight between James and Eddie in the original, framing this as a visual representation of the supposed massive problem with the game's combat. Did it look goofy when Vader and Obi-Wan daintily tap swords against each other? Yes, it did. But is it better for the film tonally to have them engaging in an epic, over-choreographed sword fight where they throw each other into walls? Would that have been better to you? Well, when speaking to fans of the remake, maybe they would think that. The awkwardness of this fight may not have been ideal, but it was worth it so we didn't have an experience so short-sightedly engaging with the worst aspects of the game. Look at this footage. Look at James Sunderland A dopey, bumbling, awkward, random clerk should not be engaging in epic combat and dodges. It is so baffling to see this character perform like this. It's a massive tonal blemish that barely fits the original, let alone the remake. It is not necessary or beneficial for a game to try and excel at every single aspect it can possibly add all at once. It is not good for this story and this game to have this much combat or even good combat you want to engage with. You have to accept that if you want a game to be scary, to be meaningfully tangible and affect the player in a deeper way, you have to impose some sort of limitation on what the player can do, or else it devolves into this. And all of this mechanical bloat and padding and trivial filler activities solely meant to unnecessarily extend the length of this game could just be removed and nothing would be lost. And I know this to be the case because the original Silent Hill 2 is less than half the length of this remake and is a tighter, more focused, and more elegant experience than the remake. It isn't concerned with wasting the player's time with busy work and annoying combat and pointless padded locales that add nothing to the narrative. The original games knew how to effectively tell a story. They said what they had to say and then they left. Yet all Bloober Team did in their remake of Silent Hill 2, like most remakes, was just taking the already existing elements and stretching them to the point of monotony for the sole purpose of padding out the length of the game. It's not surprising why a remake of this nature is so poorly paced and bloated. Making new segments and additions to Silent Hill 2 is difficult because of how concise that original game was. Every aspect, no matter how minute it may have seemed, was important to telling that story. Any major change or addition would really only serve to demystify the events of Silent Hill 2 and pull focus away from its core storytelling. I absolutely despise what they did with the Abstract Daddy boss fight. Not just because it's in poor taste, not just because it's bloated, not just because I don't like the remake, but because it's such a fundamental misunderstanding of Silent Hill 2's tone and storytelling, and why this segment worked so well and was so skin-crawlingly unsettling and disgusting in the original. This entire set piece, which was only a startlingly quick moment in the original, has now been turned into a multi-phased, action-packed combat boss fight in a very traditionally video gamey sense. In the original game, you walk into the room, see what's about to unfold, and blast this thing in a couple of shotgun shells like a rabid dog. It's so stark and unexpected the way the entire scene plays out. You're given such little time to process what you've just seen. To gamify this set piece and subject matter to this extent is so baffling, and it's mind-blowing people consider this bloated set piece done in poor taste a straight upgrade from the original. And are we just going to do this for everything now? Sensationalize everything into a series of bloated mechanical and visual vomit for the future remakes? What's the moth fight gonna be like in Silent Hill 1 Remake? Are you gonna travel through its nest and fly on its back and fight its millions of offsprings in an arena, instead of Harry frantically firing at this monster on the roof of some random building? Is the worm boss fight in Silent Hill 3 going to be a multi-stage epic where it spits white goo at Heather because we really need to hammer in the potential penis metaphor? Silent Hill 2 was a perfect 6-hour experience that has now been stretched to 15 hours. Nothing but padding, meaningless fan service, and pointless, unfulfilling mechanical bloat. The entire remake feels directionless when compared to the original. The quiet moments are now teeming with unneeded ambience and noise. The loud and disturbing is softened and shined with beautiful, expensive lights and technology. It's unbelievably inconsistent and just plain lame. Some of these horror scenes are directed so badly, I'm shocked anyone can consider these better than the original. The game is fine with giving you hours of pointless busy work and monotonous combat, but when it comes to reperforming the original game's moments, every scene is paced schizophrenically and almost rushed in its application of each element. Monsters jump and leap at you, you aggressively bash windows and stomp on monsters while the camera shakes. You're in wide open boss arenas where everything is meant to be cool. It's not cool, it's obnoxious, it's not at all what is valuable about Silent Hill or what it should aspire to be. It shouldn't be adopting lesser tropes. It's such a reactionary title in a way that I haven't seen before in a remake like this. The game just looks and sounds like the Netflix adaptation of an already existing and better story. Slap on the Netflix logo and it fits perfectly. Even Akira Yamaoka's score here is worse than the original. I could go on and on for an entire video about every scene or section that's done worse, but it's not like the people who claim the remake is better than the original actually care about this stuff. They want every old game to look and act and play like the standard formula they they've been conditioned to enjoy. Silent Hill 2 was an ingenious, beautiful, original, and inspired game that carved such an enduring and heavy legacy around it. The fact that this hollow imitation will be people's first experience with Silent Hill 2 is heartbreaking. Do not pretend that by playing the remake that you have experienced Silent Hill 2, because you didn't. And all of these hack video essayists and game journalists who use the remake when discussing the themes of Silent Hill 2 strike me as the type of people who would be tricked by a carrot on a stick if it had a sad face drawn on it with marker. Cries from grown adults about gatekeeping and the necessity of remakes aren't really going to have a sway on those who have a foothold in reality. This isn't gatekeeping, this is thinking critically about business and art like an adult. I do need to state that as harsh as I've been throughout this video, I'm not actually bothered if you like the Silent Hill 2 remake. That's perfectly fine. I am not that petty. Even if I do think you have absolutely no taste or sense of culture if you think it's better than the original. God, I just can't help myself. But so many of these Silent Hill YouTubers, regardless if they liked the game or not, have refused to talk about issues surrounding the original Silent Hill 2's unavailability. If you're so committed to the defense of your favorite IP, maybe pay respect to the thing that brought about what you worship. I think buried underneath what I find to be a baffling and bad remake is a decent survival horror game, or at least the general structure for one. Maybe what could have been an original title. And that's kind of my big question to people who defend this remake. Why wasn't this an original title? Why did it have to be a remake? The obvious answer is, of course, money, IP that people recognize and will spend money on, but it's disturbing how many fans encourage remakes as a practice, demanding that their childhoods and past experiences be reheated and served to them like a child's microwave meal. If the argument for the necessity of remakes is about accessibility, that argument falls pretty flat upon even the closest inspection. Out of the original trilogy, Silent Hill 1 is actually the easiest game to play thanks to its availability on the PS3's digital store. For $5. For the original versions of Silent Hills 2 and 3, despite their abandonware status, they would still be cheaper to acquire if you bought a PS2 and an original copy of Silent Hill 2 than if you bought a PS5 and a copy of the remake. You could also, if you care, emulate the games too. PCSX2 and DuckStation are all available for free. My footage of Silent Hill 1 here was actually emulated on DuckStation. I didn't play it for my footage here because I wanted to showcase the visuals of the original as much as possible, but I have played the fan-made Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition before, and I have been very impressed with the work on display. If you really don't want to emulate or play the original PS2 copy, you have absolutely no reason to not play the Enhanced Edition on PC. But for some, even asking to put in a little bit of legwork is just too demanding of a task. Konami and Bloober Team sell this remake as a way to bring this classic story back for everyone to experience. But I think if they actually cared and had a team work on a proper re-release of Silent Hills 2 and 3 on modern platforms, that would generate just as much attention onto the series. And I'm very certain of this because back in 2014, Capcom did a re-release of the GameCube remake of Resident Evil on modern platforms, a game that infamously undersold, and the re-release sold very well. I think people are being pretty unwise to frame this game's not being a disastrous mess of a finished product as a victory. Fans retroactively portraying this whole scenario as a sort of underdog story where Bloober Team really did it feels incredibly misguided and naive. No grasp of the bigger picture here. This was not an underdog story. This was Konami being greedy and shameless and handing their IP off to a dubious and equally shameless development team to remake their most popular game in the franchise for easy profit. When I saw the initial announcement and trailers for the Silent Hill 2 remake, I knew exactly how it would end up being. I predicted that Silent Hill 2 remake would be a very mediocre but competent enough remake that people would frame it as good because it wasn't an overtly buggy, ugly, hilarious shit show. Since the remake has been out, some of the developers of the original Silent Hill 2 have shown their praises for the remake, stating that there are aspects of the remake that they prefer to the original. And people, really ignorant people, have used this as a form of proof of the remake's superiority. And without invoking death of the author, a philosophy I do mostly agree with, there are many reasons why these statements are borderline meaningless when assessing the quality of the remake compared to the original. First of all, if the original developers seriously cared, which I'll be honest, I don't think most of them do, they would be advocating for their original game to be accessible, which I have yet to see. Second of all, any artist and creative looking back at their previous work is largely going to see nothing but mistakes and the things that they didn't get to do. I don't think constantly looking back on your work and then trying to retool it to be better is a good use of time, because you are not the same person who made that previous work at the time of creation. You likely don't share those same sensibilities, and that's fine. But these comments from some of these developers about the original game and what they prefer about the remake are all things they wish they could have done if they had what we had now. Oh, the original devs actually didn't like how the fixed camera angles look and would have gone for something else like the over-the-shoulder style so obnoxiously dominant today? Okay, if you say so, but that camera style wasn't a conception or popular back then until Resident Evil 4's release in 2005. SH2 came out in 2001, when nobody had thought to do that camera style back then. If they didn't go for the original camera system, what else would they have chosen? It's almost as if these comments by the former developers are just them retroactively wishing they had done things later developers came up with that they wish they could have done. Thirdly, many of these developers have not worked on the Silent Hill series in years, and every time they've tried to bring some of those people back to work and consult on those games, they've fallen flat on their faces. Time and time again, bringing members of the original team back has not resulted in a game on par with their original work. The mindless glazing and defense of this game from Silent Hill and Resident Evil fandom types drove me up the wall. So much of what makes Silent Hill is lost or sanded off or done so much worse. It's like no one was paying attention to what Silent Hill was at all, but because the game has pretty realistic, ultra-quality, generic Unreal Engine graphics and is an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter with the title Silent Hill, that's good enough for certain people, I guess. This tired process of trying to retool something to be objectively better is not only coming off like a massive waste of time that's keeping the medium stuck. These remakes are not made in a vacuum. They take time, money, resources, and people's lives to make these things, but it's a pursuit that rarely, if ever, results in better art. Keep in mind that when people ask for a remake of something like Resident Evil Code Veronica, they aren't asking for a better version of that experience, they're asking for a remake that plays like everything else. They don't really care to see that game's design improved because they don't care for the original and likely haven't played it, which is fine. I don't even really like Code Veronica. I don't think it's a very good game either. But at this point, why not just ask for a new game? Why does everything have to be another version of something that already exists? Same with Dino Crisis. Why are people asking for a remake of Dino Crisis and not a new Dino Crisis game? Why are gamers trapping themselves in this endless huff and loop of nostalgia? Is this what we're doing now? Are we just going to take every game from the 5th and 6th generation and turn them into third-person shooters? Is this as creative as remakes can get? I'm already seeing some demand for a remake of Silent Hill 4, the Team Silent game that is the most flawed and haphazardly put together. The game is an incredibly and creatively distinct title compared to the rest of its series and its genre, but also inadvertently messy and unapproachable in so many ways that can be hard to defend or write off as intentionally avant-garde. Silent Hill 4 being incubated in the same space as the original 3 Silent Hill games is why it still carries so much of the spirit and vibe of Silent Hill. But the end result played like an experimental offshoot that probably would have benefited if it wasn't a Silent Hill game. Love it or hate it, Silent Hill 4 was doing a lot of things many games haven't attempted to do for good or bad reasons. That results in an experience that is not the most even or just a fun moment-to-moment game, but everything it does makes it uniquely Silent Hill 4. After 3 prior games that explore their formula as thoroughly as possible, it's perfectly fine to have the final game before the dissolving of Team Silent be as strange and messy and weird as it is, regardless if it was originally meant to be a Silent Hill title or not, which we still don't really have a concrete answer to. I'm personally pretty indifferent to Silent Hill 4, but I wouldn't want a remake to remove or change everything that makes that game interesting and have the new easily digestible product version of it act as a replacement. And if people want to play Silent Hill 4, I think it would be more beneficial for them to actually play the original Silent Hill 4, decide whether or not they like it, and come away with a better understanding of the series, the medium, the genre, and how to think critically about games. If you care about games as art, and you care about games preservation, why would a hypothetical remake of Silent Hill 4 or 3, or the actual remake of Silent Hill 1 that's happening, be seen as acceptable? I'm highly doubtful a remake like that would do anything genuinely new or reinterpretive for these games. So little remakes do. The announcement of Bloober Team's remake of Silent Hill 1 is, if not depressing, actually kind of funny to me, because this technically isn't the first time Silent Hill 1 has been remade. 2009's Silent Hill Shattered Memories is kind of a remake, more along the lines of a complete reimagining of the first game's events. Shattered Memories is actually my favorite Silent Hill title post SH4, and while I don't think it's amazing, or maybe even good, what it's going for conceptually I think is pretty neat. And I can't help but think, like Silent Hill 4, how much better it would be if it wasn't a Silent Hill game. Mechanically, it plays almost nothing like the older games, and isn't even set in the same timeline as them, so it's not like it absolutely has to be a Silent Hill title. Regardless of whether or not I believe it qualifies as a Silent Hill game, it's way more interesting to me than anything Bloober Team did in the Silent Hill 2 remake. And because it's a new game, it's a better indicator of what the team who made Shattered Memories can bring to the table. Controversial opinion. I don't really know what the consensus about this game is anymore. I think 2014's PT is an expertly crafted horror experience that is still unlike anything that's come out since. I remember the impact that demo had, and this was years before I had even first played the Silent Hill games. I have no doubt that this could have been an outstanding horror game if it wasn't cancelled. However, there's nothing in here that makes me think this would have been a good Silent Hill game. Most of what has come out about PT reveals that this demo we got was just a conceptual piece, not at all reflective of what the final game was supposed to be like. Any conceptions of what Hideo Kojima's Silent Hills could have been is almost purely speculative. And while I have an immense admiration and respect for Kojima's work, this isn't his series. For all we know, his direction could have been awful. And again, like with Shattered Memories and Silent Hill 4, I would have rather we just have our own original Kojima-directed horror game that didn't have to be Silent Hill. And the more we drift from that original trilogy, the more apparent it becomes how meaningless the title Silent Hill is. I recently played the newest entry in the series, Silent Hill F, for the first time when making this video, and I was incredibly unimpressed and baffled by almost every aspect of it. Stylistically, mechanically, narratively, tonally, it has almost nothing to do with Silent Hill other than being a psychological horror game, of which there have been hundreds of since Silent Hill. The only real strands of connective tissue are that there's fog and spooky monsters, and I think there was more that defined the original Silent Hill games than that. Disregarding its status as a Silent Hill game, just judging the game on its own terms, I don't think any of what it's doing is very impressive or noteworthy, and judging it as a Silent Hill game, it's very unfitting with its colorful furry demon gods and magical fox combat arm. It's also funny to me that this game was advertised as Silent Hill but in Japan, when the original games were made in Japan with a very Japanese style and sense of horror. Like, you're already getting very Japanese sensibilities with this franchise. Like, this is just silly. I hesitate to call it a bad game because for the most part it's just okay, but it's such a fundamentally confused and awkward game that has no idea what it actually wants to be. As if Ryukishi 07 handed them a script for a horror game and Konami said, let's just slap the Silent Hill title on it so people will buy it. And once again, like with Shattered Memories, PT, and Silent Hill 4, it would have benefited the game so much more if it wasn't a Silent Hill title. Any attempts to portray this game as musing on the nature of what it means to be a Silent Hill game is pure baloney. It is obvious to anyone that the only reason this game is called Silent Hill is because of brand recognition, a title as part of Konami's wave of re-establishing Silent Hill as a commercial franchise, announcing several Silent Hill projects all at once that have been of wildly different quality and directions, starting with Silent Hill Ascension, a completely tone-deaf, interactive television type deal thing with a season pass as the first attempt to set an entire game outside of the series' namesake setting, and later releasing the baffling walking sim Silent Hill: The Short Message. Not only is that game a poorly acted and cloying experience that tries to cynically make a statement about mental health and teen suicide, but it was mainly an attempt on Konami's part to retcon the setting of Silent Hill so that they can justify why they're making several new Silent Hill games that take place anywhere. For the record, I'm not one who traditionally cares about lore, but I do care about mystique and tone. I care about setting up good horror, and this is such a blatantly corporate way to demystify the series' namesake setting. Silent Hill is anything we want it to be because the title Silent Hill is profitable. People will eat up and defend anything with the name Silent Hill on it, and that will inevitably crash and burn like it has for so many franchises in the past when people become fatigued and uninterested. And in the meantime, every hack video essayist has to pretend to sincerely judge the true artistic merit of these products, kind of like what I've been doing in this entire video. If you support or encourage these practices, if you you support the demand for these remakes and IP sequels, I think you are incredibly gullible and short-sighted. Any discussion around Silent Hill, and survival horror in general, is infested by some of the most driveling nonsense imaginable, spouted out by IP-brained idiot blue checkmark gamers and TikTok fandom types. People eager to announce what good loyal consumers they are the moment anyone questions their devotion to brand and consumerism. And I just cannot believe that all of these years later, the industry is so fundamentally uninspired and lazy that we have to go back and dig up such an innovative title like 1999 Silent Hill and bastardize and molest and parade its corpse around one more time because the publishers, developers, and consumers cannot conceptualize moving on and doing something new. One of the first remakes that really got me passionate about this phenomenon was 2023's Resident Evil 4 Remake. The original RE4, like Silent Hill 2, was already a pretty thorough, specific, and astonishingly unique game. Even if much of it was accidental, everything that game does is uniquely Resident Evil 4. It doesn't play like any game that came before it, and it doesn't play like any of the third-person shooters that came after it. So I was baffled by the existence of the remake, not just because of how definitive the original game already is, but the final product didn't do enough to justify why a remake was needed or necessary, or why this retooling was a truly worthy, transformative experience, especially in contrast to 2019's Resident Evil 2 Remake, which is what I would properly call a true reimagining. A remake that sets out to take the original's premise and do its own thing with it. We can be mad about cuts and changes, and I certainly have my issues with the game's direction, but it does so much to make it different enough from the original that I can easily point out to others what I do or don't like about it compared to the OG. It's not a replacement, even if Capcom would like to think otherwise. My hope with the RE4 remake was that if they wanted to justify a remake of that game, they would retool all of RE4's settings and mechanics to be another survival horror title like RE2 Remake. That, to me, would have genuinely been an interesting reinterpretation. Instead, what we got was a slightly more action-oriented remake that not only paled in comparison to the original game's style, but also lacked its original horror influences, continuing the reboot's preference for realism and having it play like every other third-person shooter that's come out since. And the Silent Hill 2 remake felt like the worst creative decisions made in both of those remakes smashed into one game. It doesn't do anything to warrant its existence, and didn't offer me a new perspective on Silent Hill 2 other than reminding me about the gaming industry being so creatively bankrupt that we just have to relitigate everything good that game already did. A boring remake with nothing interesting to say. I think any game that can be directly compared side by side to its original and constantly go, hey, remember thing from the original? Really doesn't have the confidence or forward thinking required to actually do anything new. I saw that nothing had changed with how Bloober Team made games. Everything that made their older titles so monotonous and derivative was right here. I have more respect for that stupid fucking baby than I do anything in the Silent Hill 2 remake, but instead of that same vitriol, we had an unabashed and almost cult-like defense of the remake by fans. Not fans of Bloober, mind you, though they may exist, but Silent Hill fans. Fandom. People with wildly misaligned and misguided attachments towards brand and IP and online communities. So in order to justify the existence of such an affronting remake like Bloober Team's Silent Hill 2, people need to convince themselves that Silent Hill is this malleable, marketable idea that can be easily bent for constant reinterpretation, seeding ideas into people's heads that there was something actually wrong with the original Silent Hill 2, that the quirks that made Silent Hill what it was are actually problems that needed to be fixed, satisfying the gluttonous, incurious, nostalgia-trapped slobs who would easily fall for the idea of a Silent Hill remake. I'm sure that's exactly what companies like Konami want you to believe. But to anyone who isn't a fool and has no respect for IP and franchise and has actual respect for the art itself and the artists behind these original works, that's a very hard idea to buy into. It is exhausting to think about how little gamers actually care about art with their refusal to engage with a work simply because it's old, an admission of stupidity and closed-mindedness on their part. And with the original Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3 being abandonware, and the remake solidifying the fact that the original games will never be available on modern storefronts, these remakes are only going to cause more harm to the availability and legacy of these original titles in the long run. This is why I don't say bullshit like, the game has aged, or good for the standards of its time. What does that even mean? It's stupid, benign word dribble. Art doesn't age. It doesn't rot like cheese or get better like wine. It stays the exact same. The footage of Silent Hill you're seeing on my screen is the exact same games people saw back in 1999, 2001, 2003, and 2004. Silent Hill is not a franchise idea, and it's better that it isn't. But that hasn't stopped Konami from trying to make it one. Silent Hill isn't a Resident Evil. It was never built to last and have multiple multiple entries with long-spanning, ongoing narratives and a series of mechanics continuously building upon themselves. The original Silent Hill titles were simultaneously very complete, but also incredibly contingent on each other, and that makes it a tough series to breach and do anything truly new with. Discussions around the nature of a game like Silent Hill 2 are fascinating to me, because so much of the reason that game is the way that it is because it is a sequel to Silent Hill 1, setting itself up much like the first game, but recycling all of its elements to create a wholly unique experience that is still firmly Silent Hill. That is so specific and so hard to pull off with a sequel like that remaking that experience completely misses the point of what it was trying to do. And you can only really do something like that once. If you're making a new Silent Hill game, you're kind of just retreading the same exhausted material. The one through line connecting those first 4 games is how indefinable they are, and how tied to their era and place of creation they are. They were some of the most resonating art that video games had ever seen. I don't see any other developer making a game like Silent Hill 3, where a woman eats the fetus of God. It's fucking genius. If someone was able to thoroughly investigate those specific elements and painstakingly recreate that specific vibe, then you would maybe have a possibility of making a good Silent Hill game. But that would only be the first step of the process. And if your end result did resemble everything that made those original games good, you'd likely just be retreading the same waters. And to me, that would be a waste of time. And right now, with the way the industry is, I don't trust Bloober Team or any other developer to remake that. I know that there are many people at Bloober Team that do greatly admire the original games, but the specific quality of those games are not what Bloober Team is interested in recreating, nor does Konami want anything like the original games. They're only interested in laundering the brand of Silent Hill, not the fundamental ingredients. And in making these games more like that of current game studios, they might ensure that the Silent Hill series can maintain that level of success. And when looking at the sales of the remake, it's sadly been working. The original Silent Hill games weren't an abstract, malformed, unfinished idea that exhausted the confines of a technology that held them back. They were works of beauty, a pastiche of the many people and influences that got us to that point in time, adorned lovingly and passionately onto its unique canvas. It exists as it was intended at that time, and it's perfect, and it is Silent Hill. In the words of Francis Bacon, one of the artists who inspired Silent Hill, "There is no excellent beauty that hath not some strangeness in the proportion." So forgive me for thinking games can be art, and not just corporate products meant to shift units. Forgive me for thinking about the weird and messy ways games can be used to convey meaning, and tangible, sometimes uncomfortable feelings. And instead of looking to replace the things we once loved with a phony and dubious replacement, instead of wandering through the unending fog of the past, I think it would be best if people moved on and lived for themselves now.
Today's the last day, brother. We have 1 hour to vacate the premises. We'll have to leave this post behind. I'm certain we'll find somewhere else to stay. There are more rituals to be done, I'm sure. Do you have everything packed?
What even is there to pack? We have nothing left. The church is gone. My faith is gone. What even is left to care about? I just can't believe it. Everything we have ever done was a lie, all for nothing. And now we're being evicted. And this is what we've left? Our chapel that stood upon this unholy land, now destined to become derelict playgrounds for humanity's bastard offspring? Was every failed sacrifice meant to distract from the question of my own existence? Why am I here? What even was my purpose? All I've known is the church, all I've known is this pumpkin patch, and all I see ahead of me is static. Why should I care? Why should I bother? All of the terror I've done for the cult, all of the dread we've brought upon these plains. And for what end? To stay a pumpkin? Tell me, brother, what is there to hope for? That's what I thought.
The air is much colder than usual. Dry and arid compared to our once temperate autumn weather. A climate like this would be much unsuitable for a couple of pumpkins such as ourselves.
Who dares take my precious relic?
What? What was that?
It was you, wasn't it?
Who? Who are you?
I am the Rat God, the Lord you two Mongols claim to worship.
The Rat God.
It really is him.
One of you has taken my relic.
What is going on? What relic?
This.
The Rat God's sacred relic? It exists? Where did you find it?
I found it in the church's closet like 2 years ago. I thought I could pawn it off on eBay.
That relic belongs to me. It belongs to my son. My dear, beautiful son. It would have been the perfect gift for his birth if you two idiots hadn't completely ruined every sacrifice of yours. For over a year now, I have repeatedly watched you two buffoons fail to bring about the proper birth for my son. Every failed sacrifice, every sacred lamb you've let slip away, every potential mate you accidentally scared off, I have had to bear witness to, and you two idiots didn't even have the foresight to check back on your home church. For you would have realized it had gone bankrupt because of your many failed sacrifices. And now you simply give up. You two idiot pumpkins are worthless. Completely unfit to worship me in my dominion of rats. For your insolence, for your incompetence, and your complete and utter disregard for my word, my will, and the gift belonging to my son, you will be sentenced to eternal damnation. If you cannot bring my son into this world, then I will.
This cannot be true. We have been locked out of our Lord's heaven.
Wait, that's it. The relic. I have to use it.
Use the relic? But, you've read the text, haven't you? If you use the relic, then we will never see the afterlife. Our souls will simply cease to exist from every plane. We will be completely gone. Forever.
Maybe. But maybe we will be taken to that place, that beautiful barn I saw in my dream. Maybe this relic is the key to finally escaping. I know your history more than you think I do, brother. The church took you here against your will much like you did me, and I forgive you for that, but now I see you've been trying to protect me, and maybe protect all of Pumpkinkind. The Rat God tricked all of us, and maybe by using this relic we can escape. Escape to a better life. The living realms aren't fit for two pumpkins like us. I'm willing to risk it all to escape the thought of his endless torment, his so-called holy world. We either enter the Red Barn, or cease to exist. Either way, I'm done with this stupid cult. What do you say, brother? Willing to take a chance?
Use that relic, you goddamn sexy little son of a bitch.
In nomine omnium sanctorum, in nomine agri cucurbitorum, et mirum quos corpora nostra pascent, sit mihi benedictum ad Deo Murium. HeyThereKurt. Filius de Murium.
Yeah, homie, that's what I'm talking about. Need some big ass titties in my face, for real, for real.
What?
patch, oh pumpkin patch.
Let's all run to pumpkin patch.
Pumpkin patch, oh pumpkin patch.
Fun and sun in pumpkin patch.
Freckles and speckles will sing a little song.
Woofles goes woof 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 and sings along. Pumpkins are tasty and very good to eat.
Pumpkin pie is such a treat. Pumpkin patch, oh pumpkin patch. Let's all stay in pumpkin patch. Pumpkin patch, oh pumpkin patch. Every day we play in pumpkin patch.
Did it work?